Hello everybody, and welcome to what's probably going to be several videos on building an e-bike. Now, I built myself an e-bike probably over a year ago, but unfortunately I didn't film the process, so I didn't have any footage to make a video about it. But my wife now wants an e-bike, and so I'm going to build her one, and I thought it would be a good opportunity to film it and make a video about what you need to do in order to do it. E-bikes, for those who don't know, come in basically two flavours. You can have a hub motor bike, which is basically an electric motor embedded in one of the wheels of the bicycle. Or you can have a crank motor or a mid motor e-bike, where you have a motor which basically replaces the pedals, and so it turns the main pedal crank, and that obviously turns the chain which drives the back wheel. So there's advantages and disadvantages to both. The hub motors are typically cheaper and a lot easier to make an e-bike from. They also have the benefit that they work even if your chain is not working. For example, if your chain snapped, you could still use the hub motor to get yourself home. But that's about the limit for them, and they're typically cheaper and good for an e-bike that you're going to use just for cycling on the road. That's not going to go up too steeper hills, but just, if you're just going to use it for cycle paths and things like that. Whereas a mid-drive or a mid-motor e-bike, they typically can be more powerful, but not necessarily, but typically. And because they drive the main chain crank, you can still use the gears on the back wheel. Which means you can adjust how much power is going into the wheel, and that makes them more suitable for things like cycling in the forests and going off-road and things like that. So if you want to have a mountain bike where you can take it into the woods and have a bit of fun with it as well, then a mid-drive is probably going to suit you better. But they tend to be a little bit more expensive and a little bit more complicated to build. Okay, so you've probably seen e-bikes in the shops. They are quite a range in price now. A really cheap one I think I've seen for in the 600s somewhere, but that will have a very small hub motor, and it will have a very small battery, probably only good for sort of 20 miles or something, which could be enough for you if you're just going to use the bike for commuting to work, and work's not that far, then that could suit you fine, in which case £600 is a pretty good price. But they range all the way up to £2,000, £3,000, £4,000, if you want to get a really top-notch mountain bike with a very powerful motor and a big battery, etc. So it really depends what you're after, but if you do want to have a mid-drive with a fairly big battery, you can typically build one for cheaper than you can buy one. That's certainly been my experience. Look for yourselves, but that's the conclusion I've come to. So I built my one a year ago, and now I need to build one for my wife. So the first thing you've got to do is obviously find your bicycle that you want to use as your starting point. Now, if you've got a bicycle already, you could just use that and just electrify that. That's no problem. In my wife's case, she doesn't really have a bicycle. She's got a very old one from when she was like 16, and it's not in the best shape anymore, and it's made of steel. It's very heavy, and so we're going to replace her bike with a brand new lighter aluminium framed one, a mountain bike, because that's what she prefers. So we need to go and find a mountain bike that's, you know, got the right sort of things on it. Now, for me, what I'm looking for when I'm making an e-bike, or I'm starting with a bike that I'm going to make into an e-bike, what you want to try and do is find a bicycle that has separate gear shifters and brakes. Now you see that some of the bikes that are available in the shops today, they have a gear shifter and a brake lever all in one unit, so you can't separate them. It's just a single unit. You don't really want to get one of those. I mean, you can work with it, but ideally you want to have the brake lever being separate from the gear shifter. And that's because when you make an e-bike, you're going to have to swap the brake handles off for special ones that have got cutouts in them to cut the motor if you pull the brakes. So having them as two separate things means you can just remove the brake without having to do anything with the gears, and it just makes life a lot easier. So when you look for a bike, look for one that has got separate gear shift, lever and brake. The other thing you want to look for is you need to make sure that the crossbar and the horizontal bar, that sort of triangle shape in the middle, is going to be big enough to hold the battery. Some women's bikes in particular, the frames are a bit more compressed, and you'll find that the battery won't fit into that gap. So it's very important before you commit to buying a bike that you find one with the right size, the space for a battery. So here's one of my son's bikes, and you can see the size of this frame. There's no problem with this one. You get any size battery in there, just to prove it. Here's my battery, and you can see, look, there's absolutely acres of room. So a bike like this would be no problem. The one behind it, however, my other son's bike, you can see that the frame on this one is a lot tighter. So this one would be a little bit more tricky. I think it would still fit this one, but you can see it is only just, and you're going to need to have room for the actual mounting plate as well, and you need to be able to slide it off. So that bike is probably about as small as you could go if you wanted to have a crossbar mounted battery, rather than one of the units that sort of sits on the back as a rack, and you know, connects on and gives you a little parcel shelf, but has the battery mounted in it as well. So the dimensions of this are about 37 centimeters long by about 9 centimeters wide, by about 11 centimeters deep. So what you could do is you know, cut out some bits of cardboard in those dimensions and stick it together just to make a sort of a cardboard box this size, and then you could take that with you to the bike shop, and then just see if it will fit comfortably inside the frame before you commit to buying that bicycle. The other thing I'm looking for is that it's got disc brakes. Again, you can get it to work with the block brakes, but I find that the disc brakes are a bit more powerful, and if you're riding with a motor and it's got, you know, quite a lot of power, and you want to stop quickly, the disc brakes just work a bit better. So for me, I'm going to be looking for a bicycle that's got a good set of disc brakes on it as well. They don't have to be the hydraulic ones, they can just be the mechanical ones, but still the disc brakes just seem to work better. And that's it. So the first step then will be to go and have a look around the bike shops and see if we can find a bike for my wife. And then once we've got that, there's some measurements we need to make, and then after we've made those measurements, we can go through the ordering process and order the motor and the battery.
So here's the bike she chose. It's a Carrera Krakinos. It's from Halfords. It was about £360, and you can see that it's got the separate brake and gear connections. See, there's two brackets here, and that means that it'll be a lot easier to remove this derailleur for the front cog, because this won't be needed once you've got the crank motor in there, and so that can be removed, and the associated shifter, which is probably this, no, it'll be the one on this side, can be removed, and that will make space then for the thumb throttle, which you will want to put on to go with the motor, so that you can just cruise along using your thumb as a throttle instead of having to pedal if you want to. It also has a little screw hole here, which will be good for mounting the front light. Obviously, as I mentioned, it's got disc brakes, which I think work better on an e-bike, and yeah, it's she's pleased with it. She likes the colour, and it's a nice one. It has also got a thing here if you wanted to put a rear light on, or a mudguard or something. And I think these two screw holes here are if you wanted to mount a parcel shelf, which if you want to go for the battery that's built into a parcel shelf, you probably need those potentially. But one thing we have noticed is that because of these two screws here, the seat pole won't go any lower than there, which means this seat is as low as it can go, but it's still a bit too high for her. But you can see there's actually still a couple of 5-6 centimeters worth of pole there. So what we're going to do is take the pole out when I finish the bike and hacksaw about that much off the bottom, so that we can then put it all the way down, and the seat will be, you know, sat right here, and then it will make it about the right height for her. Yeah, so there you go, that's the donor bike, and here you can see the battery, and you can see that we got enough of a clearance that even with the base on there, there's enough room to slide it to get it off and out. Hopefully it should be just enough, but this is about as small realistically as you could go, and still fit it on there. I mean, if you can get a smaller battery pack, you know, you might be able to mount it here, and if the worst came to the worst, and you know, you bought the bike and you were committed, and you know you couldn't get it in there, you can always, you know, mount it on the top like that if you had to, but in here looks best. Let's get this turned over, and we'll take some measurements that you will need in order to order the motor that's going to fit in here. So what you're going to want to do is to count the number of teeth on the main cog that your bike has, so that you can order the closest matching toothed cog to come with your motor. And the reason you want to do that is because if you order one that's so much bigger, then you'll end up pulling the chain much tighter, and so you'll probably end up actually having to buy a bigger chain so that there's enough spare chain to make it all the way around the bigger loop. So the closer you can get to your current one, the better. On this bike, it's 36 teeth, and the smallest one they do is 44, I think, 44 teeth. So that's the one I would go for in this case. The other thing you need to make a note of is the size of this, because the motor crank has to fit through here so that the pedals can go on either side, and these are different sizes on different bikes. Now, most bikes, unless they're fat tire bikes, will have a standard size here. So you can see that on this bike it is about 7 centimeters, or just over 7, and that's typical for most normal bikes. But you need to measure that distance and write it down, ready for the ordering process, because it will ask you how big that bit is.
So we've got the bicycle we want, we've made the measurements we need to make. Now we can go ahead and order the motor and the battery from Amazon. So we'll do that now.
Okay, so you come to Amazon, and then you're going to want to type something like Bafang 750 kit with battery. And what you see is you get loads of entries here, but this one looks like it's the sort of thing we're after. So you've got mid-drive motor kit, various size motors. So you just have to see, well, we've got a battery and we've got the motor, and then you've got a display and a light and the mounting brackets and the wires and cable ties and just about everything you need, even a thing for getting your pedals off. So so what you need to do is decide what size motor you want. So there's a drop down here. So for my wife, she's going to have a 750 watt motor. Now this 68 millimeters, that's the width of the crank that you need to have measured beforehand. Most bicycles, unless they're big fat tire bikes, will probably be 68 millimeters. And certainly that's the one her bike is. So you want 68 millimeters, 750 watts. It'll be a 48 volt system. Now you can have either an 18 amp hour or a 20 amp hour battery, which is a down tube battery, which is the sort I want. I'm sure there are ones on here that you can order with the tray batteries that go in the sort of rack at the back, but this is the one I want. So that is that, and then you've got to choose which display you want. Now you could realistically have any of these, but I know on my existing bike I've got an 850, I think it is. Let's have a look. 850C, that one. So it'd be good if hers was the same, so I'll pick that one. So that takes my price to 732. Yeah. So yeah, let's have a look at this battery down tube extension. Yeah, so you see this metal bar screws into your drinks bottle holder, and then it gives you some other holes to mount your battery plate to. So this would make life a lot easier. So I would suggest getting one of these as well. For the sake of £23, it will save you some time. So yeah,
think I would probably go for that. So use the special offer and get a battery extension plate and save a bit of money as well when you get that. But that's it really, that's all you need to buy. So you'll get your battery, your motor, your display, which is also the controller. I'm not sure what you need white gloves for, but you get this tool which you need to tighten this nut up that's over here. You get a light, you get a tool for removing the pedals on the current bike, all the cables you need, some cable ties, things like that. So yeah, that's the one to go for. Order that and should be good to go.